Hello, in this video we will create this logo animation with volumetrics and a cool lens flare in Blender 2.8 using the awesome speed of EEVEE. Okay, here we are in Blender 2.8. This is still alpha version 2. At the time of the recording, the beta version should be coming out any day now. But I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference. Right, so first thing, we need some sort of logo. So let's delete the default cube by hitting X. And then, of course, we could just go in and add a text. Go to edit mode. And enter some sort of text, rotate it, X, then extrude it, and all that sort of stuff. But what I want to do is I want to use a logo, and I'm going to use the Blender logo. Of course, you can use your logo or your company's logo or whatever. So let's go to the Blender homepage, and right here in About and Logo, you can download this file, which contains an SVG, which is a vector file of the Blender logo. And when you download that, you get this zip file, Blender plane. And that actually contains blend files as well. But I'm not going to use those because when you get a logo from your designer or from your client, you're most likely not going to get a blend file. You're going to get a vector file of some sort. And you can always convert that to an SVG. So that's what we're using. I just take the SVG and extract it here. And in Blender, I can go File, Import, and down here we have SVG. I take the Blender logo and import that. And usually when you import SVG files, they are very, very tiny, just like here. Okay, so this is what's in the SVG file, and we're gonna pick one of those. So let me see if I select this backplate here and I delete it. So this is the logo that has that white background behind it. I don't want that. I'm gonna go with this one. Right, so from top view, delete all this, box select this and delete that. And here we have the logo. I Control J all of these things together so that I have one curve. Then I go into edit mode, scale it up a lot. And place it somehow in the center of my scene here. I'm also gonna rotate it on the x-axis and move the camera. I hit Alt-G, Alt-R to place the camera back into the center point. Then from the side view, I rotate the camera 90 degrees and move it on the y-axis. So let me just split the screen here and go into camera view by hitting the 0 on the numpad. So this is what the camera sees. Now I can move the camera to something like this. This lamp that we get from the default scene, I'm just going to use and make it into a spot lamp. Also hitting Alt-G-R to place it back at the 0 point. Rotate it 90 degrees and move it behind our logo. Okay, the logo is a curve, and curves can easily be extruded, which I'm gonna do, but just a little bit to make it three-dimensional. Also, I'm gonna go to the materials, remove the material that it comes with from the SVG file, create a new one, and make it so almost black. I don't know, we'll play with that later. Okay, so from top view we can see I'm gonna actually move this closer and make the spot shape bigger, right? So that it looks like this. Okay, so we have a logo, we have a lamp, and when we go into rendered view here, now this is EEVEE. You can see, we can already see the logo and the light hitting the logo. I'm not sure. Well, let me switch off the overlays. Okay. Yeah, this looks okay. So, right, so this is the logo and the lamp. Now we need the fog. We can add the fog to the entire world, or something else I like to do to get a little bit more control is to add the fog to just a cube. So this is going to be our fog domain. I'm going to scale that up. I'm gonna leave the camera outside of the cube, and I will switch the cube over to wire so that we can see through it here in the viewport. Right, now the cube needs a material, so we go to the material, add a new material, and I'm gonna split this window here and set this to a, let me see, set this to the shader editor for the cube. The cube doesn't need a surface, so we're gonna remove that and add a shader volume scatter and attach it to the volume input. Now to see volumetrics in EEVEE, we actually have to enable them here with this switch. And we can also set certain volumetric properties here. Maybe we'll play with that later. The material doesn't need anything switched on or changed here at the moment. And right, so now if we take the lamp and we move it, we can see we already get sort of a volumetric effect. But I think that the density is a little bit too thick. Also, we might even need to get closer with the lamp here. Or further away. Oh, this looks better. Okay. This looks cool. Right. Okay, so this is the effect we get. Now let's also add a little bit of an interesting fog here. This is just plain white fog at the moment, which is not what I want. I want the density to not be even. I want it to be a little bit, I want it to have some variation. So I take a noise texture, take the factor and plug it into the density. And I'm also gonna insert a color ramp in between, so I get a little bit more control here. I'm gonna crank up the contrast of this color ramp here, and the scale to something like 10. And now you can see our fog has noise in it, so it's not just a uniform sort of fog. It has some variation in it, which is cool. And I think we're also going to animate this a little bit then later. Now I want some color, so again I duplicate the noise texture, give it a different size, duplicate the color ramp, set this color to something greenish, and this color more bluish, so we get gradient between green and blue and get this sort of teal color going in the fog. Whoops, I want the color. Right. Cool. I think I can turn down the scale a little bit. So we have greenish fog now, and we have noise in the color and also noise in the fog density. Right? And turn this down even a little bit more. Okay. So looking through the camera, this looks cool already. When I move the lamp, we get those shadows in the fog. I can also turn down the blend to maybe get better shadows. Let's see. Oh, but this looks pretty good. Let's also play with the density here. Okay, fog effect. Right, what if we move the camera inside the fog? That doesn't, I don't think that makes much of a difference. Okay. So, this is our fog. And this, the lamp, where exactly is the lamp? Maybe we need to move that up and down a little. Okay, so it's like right there. Maybe I'm gonna move it down on the Z-axis a little. GC moves it down. Okay, so now the lamp is gonna move right through the logo along this line here when we animate it on the X-axis. And we get these nice foggy volumetric effects. And as you can see here, EEVEE not only looks really cool, it's also very fast. This is, by the way, rendered on a GTX 1080 Ti. Right, I think we're gonna get some nice effects here. Okay. So the lamp itself, I think I want to turn up the energy. Or down? No. Oh, I don't know. Let's give it an energy of 7. And also maybe give it a little bit of a... No, keep it white. Okay. Let me just render out one of the images here. I'm gonna place the lamp so that we can have it in the frame right there. And when I hit F12, this is what we get, basically instantly. Okay, first thing I'm gonna change is in the render settings over here. I'm gonna turn up the render samples to 128 and the volumetric samples also to 128. That slows down the rendering a little bit, but it gives much nicer, cleaner volumetrics. So this is our rendering. Now let me go over to compositing, because we'll be doing quite a bit of compositing. First off, I'm gonna split the view. I'm just gonna split it down, take this down here, switch this to the UV editor and the render result. I'm gonna use nodes and put some stuff in between here. So first thing I want to add is this sort of lens flare. And the anamorphic lens flare that you know from Hollywood blockbusters has just one blue flare going across. So we can use the glare node set to streaks, which works okay, but it doesn't work on our lamp. And even if I turn up the threshold, I would have to turn up the energy of the lamp. So I need to fake something here. I need to do something differently. And I'm gonna remove this. And this is where the new view layers come in. Right, so in Blender 2.8 we don't have render layers anymore. Instead we have view layers. And what I'm gonna do is right there behind my lamp, I'm gonna add a let's take an icosphere, scale it down quite a bit and move it to be right behind the lamp. Right? So when we look at it from front view, it should be right behind the lamp. When we look at it through the camera, I'm going to scale it down even further. And this icosphere gets a new material, which is going to be an emission shader set to something really high, like 50. And now we get a nice white dot. And we can use this white dot to create our anamorphic lens flare. And I'm gonna hit render and see if I can use it in our compositor. If we add the filter glare again, so we get glare everywhere. I have to turn up the threshold to something much higher. I only want 2 streaks. Right, so now we get this lens flare. Okay. But we also get the lens flare everywhere else, and you might want this, but actually I wanted to show you how to use the view layers. So I'm gonna do it differently. I'm actually gonna I'm gonna move this curve into this collection and simply delete this collection. Now I'm gonna add a new collection and move the icosphere, which is the white dot that we get, into this collection. And the curve, let me just rename this to Blender logo. Right, so now I can say I have a view layer and I'm gonna name this logo, or let's call it fog. And I want the icosphere to not be inside the fog. So I right click here and set exclude this view layer. So now we don't have the icosphere in this view layer. I'm gonna create a new view layer and call it flare and exclude this collection from the flare. Right, so now in fog we have the logo, the fog, the light, the shadows of the light and everything. And in the view layer flare we only get this little dot. Oh, one thing I forgot. I wanted to set the world to black. Oh, that makes the fog look nicer already. Okay. Now let me also go in and animate the lamp. So on our frame 1 here, the very beginning, I'm gonna move the lamp over to be outside of the camera's view. So right here, go to the properties here, what is it called? The object tab, and insert the keyframe for the location by hovering over the location and hitting I. So now this is keyed here. Now I go to the end of the animation, 250 frames. I GX the lamp to be on this side of the frame and hit I again, hovering over the location. So now we have this animation of the lamp moving from left to right, and up here we can already see what it's gonna look like. So this is very nice. Let's go in the middle somewhere. When you add keyframes, Blender always creates sort of an easing, which you can edit in the graph editor. And here you can see our X location of the lamp, which is selected, is going to start off slow and then speed up and then finish slow again. Now I don't want this. I want this to move just in a linear fashion. So I just select all of them, hit T, linear, linear, and then this is what we get. So now the lamp moves. It doesn't speed up or slow down. It just moves across in one speed. Okay. But one thing that's missing now is our icosphere. Okay, let me just put it back into the fog collection for now. Go back to frame 1. Now move the icosphere to be where the lamp is. And then one simple thing we can do to keep it connected so that the icosphere moves along with the animated lamp is just to have the icosphere, then shift select the lamp, hit Ctrl P, set parent to object. And now when the lamp moves, it moves the icosphere with it. And we can see on the top left here that we get the white dot moving along too. Okay. Now I move the icosphere back to our second collection. Now when I hit render, we actually get 2 images rendered out. So if we go to the compositor, the first image, switch over to viewer node here. The first image is the fog, and I can duplicate this render layer and select the flare layer, which is just the dot. Now I'm gonna add our glare node to just the dot image. I'm gonna set the fade to 0.985 and increase the iterations to 5, which gives us this very long sort of anamorphic Hollywood style lens flare. But this is just still white now, so we need to add a color balance node and shift the darks to blue, bluish, midtones to something like this is teal color. Okay, maybe the highlights to a little bit of a yellowish color. So this is the lens flare that we get, and we can add that on top of our image by mixing it in like this and setting the mix type to add. Right, so now we have the lens flare on top of the fog image. Now one thing we notice, and this is already the perfect position, I think. No. Let me see, compositor. So the lamp is over here, but what I want to show you is, let me move the timeline where the lamp is actually, let's place the lamp behind this part of the logo here. So right now we would actually not see the white dot and the lens flare. But when I hit F12 and go to compositing, you can see that we get the lens flare, although the lamp is behind the logo. So there's an easy way to avoid this. The reason for this being is that in this collection, in the flare collection, we only have the icosphere, the white dot, and it doesn't get hidden behind the logo when the white dot moves. So all we really need to do is go to the fog collection, take the Blender logo and control drag it onto the second collection. So we get link inside collection. So now the Blender logo is also in the flare collection here. And when the lamp, the white dot moves, you can look over here. When I move the timeline, the white dot actually moves behind the logo and will not be visible when the logo is in front of it. So let's move back to the position where the logo, where the dot, the lamp is behind the logo, right, like right here, and hit F12. And we can see we get the fog and everything, but no lens flare. And when I move the logo to be inside the B, I mean when I move the lamp to be inside and visible here, and I hit F12, then we get the lens flare. Cool, so this is the animation. Now, one other thing I want to do is I want to make the lens flare flicker a little bit. And I think I'm just going to do this in the material of the icosphere. The emission of the material right now is 50, the strength of the lamp, not the lamp, the little white dot. So I think I'm gonna animate this strength value here. I'll go back to the beginning of my animation and add a keyframe by hovering over it and hitting I. And we can already see here that we have the shader node here inside our graph editor. Since we have a keyframe now, we have it in the node tree. And now I'm gonna hit N, go to modifiers, add a noise modifier. You can see here what that does. So it's gonna modify my strength a little, but this is not enough. We're gonna have to increase the amplitude here. So down here is 0. I'm gonna turn this up quite a bit. And also when I hit play, I think I'm gonna bring down the scale a little. So we should get some flickering in the strength of the white dot. Now hopefully that shows up in our lens flare. Also, like I said before, I want to move. I want the fog to move a little. So on our fog domain object, the fog density, the noise, and maybe even the color. No, I'm gonna leave the color. I'm gonna animate the noise. So I hit Ctrl T on this node with the node wrangler, which is now default in 2.8. We get a texture coordinate and the mapping. And we can animate the location. I'm gonna animate the C value. So I go back to my first frame here, hit I to add a keyframe. And then at on the last frame here, I'm gonna set the C location to 0.3 and hit I again. And now the fog slowly falls down, as you can see here. Right. Cool. So let's give this a try. Oh, one last thing I think I want to do here in the compositor is I'm going to add a filter, no, a distort, lens distortion, and set the dispersion to 0.1, which fakes this sort of lens dispersion. Just gives it a nice sort of, it might add to the anamorphic lens look, I don't know. And also I'm going to add a vignette. Now the way that I make vignettes is I take an ellipse mask, which is this thing, set the width to 0.7, the height to 0.6, maybe the width to 0.8. Then add a filter, a filter blur node, fast Gaussian, relative 25%. Lens distortion is going to be at the end, so now let me multiply the vignette on top of our image, and now we get this nice vignette in the corners here. I might even increase this by doing 0.7, 0.5 to get the corners darker. Okay. Also, one thing that we can notice here, the glare node, when we turn up the color modulation, you get sort of the pixelated lens flare here. And we can avoid that simply by adding a filter blur. Again, fast Gaussian, relative. And we simply blur it a little bit along the X. And then that smooths out our lens flare quite a bit. Okay, so this is the node setup that we have so far. And I think this is pretty cool already. Also, we have to plug it into the composite, otherwise we don't get an output when we render the animation. Okay, so now let's set up the animation. This is going to be full HD, 1 to 250. We want 25 frames per second. I'm going to set the output to this directory. I'm just going to do an FFmpeg video, RGB. I want MP4 encoding, H.264. Of course, we want high quality. Right, that's it. And then I think everything is set up. And then we render the animation to the file. Render animation. And this is where the awesome speed of EEVEE comes in, because now in cycles we would be waiting quite a while. But in EEVEE you can see each frame just takes a couple of seconds. Now I'm gonna let this render out, and I'll be back when it's done. Okay, rendering is done. Let's see what we got. So this is the result. That looks pretty nice. Okay, one thing I noticed. First of all, the flickering is quite strong, and I think I know why. Also, let me go back to the beginning. Also, the fog animation that makes the fog sort of descend also speeds up and slows down. Speeds up at the beginning here. and then slows down at the end. That's again because Blender, when you add keyframes, adds those Bezier curves to the keyframes. Okay, so we have to fix that and the flickering. And also I think I want a little bit of camera movement in there so that we get a different angles on the Blender logo. Okay, let's go back and fix some things. So first of all, the fog. On the fog domain, which is already selected in the graph editor, where we have our material, see location. Yep, here we have that curve again. So again, we just select everything, hit T and make that linear. So now the fog is not going to accelerate and decelerate because that doesn't look right. Also, I think the fact that the flickering sometimes creates frames. Let's play it again. Where is it? Sometimes there are frames in there where there's basically no, like this one here, where there's no lens flare. And I think it's because of this here, because I used the threshold. I hope that fixes that. We can also check the flickering on our flare object here. We have the material node and the noise. Oops, this is, wow, that zoomed in quite a bit. Okay, it flickers down to all the way to 0. That's a bit strong. Let's reduce the strength so that we stay around the 50. A little bit stronger and a little bit. So what is this, 20? Maybe that looks a little bit better. Now I also want to add a little bit of a camera movement. First of all, I'm gonna set the camera focal length to 24 to get more of a wide angle view and move in a little. So at the first frame, I'm gonna add an iframe to the location. And then at the last frame, I'm gonna move in a little. Also add a keyframe. And then in the curve editor here, I'm gonna rotate this one so that it doesn't start off slow, but it can finish slow. So what is this? What do we get here? We move in on the logo, and then it slows down. Okay, maybe even more than that. Drag this out with scale. Let's see. So camera moves in and slows down. Okay. I think this looks cool. Okay, let's look at the video from before again. Where is it? Okay, we might also want a little bit of a bloom effect on the brighter parts here, like right here and here, which in EEVEE is super easy. We just switch on bloom. Which gives us this effect. Now let's see, that is quite a lot, so we turn that down to maybe 0.1, just to get a little bit of an effect here and warm it up a little. Oh, this looks pretty nice. Okay, so I think we're done. I'm gonna give this another render and then we'll look at our final result. One thing I forgot. With the new camera lens, that I changed to be a 24mm focal length. Actually, at the beginning, our lamp is already in the shot. I'm not sure if we want that or not, but I think I'm gonna change the location to come in from the outside of the shot. So, looking through the camera, GX, move it out here, and hit I on the location. Then we go to the end of the animation, GX, move it out, and hit I again. So we start off with the light being off frame, and then it comes in, goes behind the logo, and leaves the frame. And we can actually use, if we wanted to use this for a video intro or something, we could actually fade in while it's coming in and then fade out while it's leaving the frame. Something like that. Okay, now let's render this, and I'll be back when it's done. Okay, rendering has completed. That took under half an hour for 250 frames, which I think is pretty insane when you think that this includes a whole lot of volumetrics. So this is the result here. The flickering looks awesome. The fog is moving nicely. We have a little bit of a camera move in there. Okay, this is cool. Now, just for fun, because I'm interested in it, let's see how long one frame takes to render in cycles. Okay, the cycles render is done, and it took 18 minutes and 57 seconds. So again, just like in my previous videos about EEVEE, the speed of EEVEE and the quality you can get out of it is actually pretty amazing. For a still render, like single frame, you might still go with cycles because it's photorealistic. But for animations, I mean, every second counts when you think of animations. So the difference between 6 or 7 seconds for a frame and almost 19 minutes is, I mean, I wouldn't render this animation in cycles. Also, one thing we have to consider is in EEVEE, the compositor, this node setup here that creates the vignette effect and the distortion and the lens flare and all of that. This takes a few seconds, so the rendering time for the image is probably only like 4 or 5 seconds. Okay, this is it for this video. Please let me know in the comments what you think. Also, please like, comment, subscribe to my channel to see more Blender, EEVEE and Cycles tutorials. I'll be back with a new video. See you soon.